One of the central topics in human cognition is conceptual frames. How do people understand? How do they construe what they're looking at? How do these frames inform their communication for intersubjective interaction? It's a big part of cognitive science theory. But it's also a big part of research in computation. To what extent might synthetic agents be equipped with framing abilities, frame blending abilities? We research these things in Red Hat. And we're delighted today to welcome a world expert in framing, Federico Belcavello, who got his PhD at the Federal University of Juiz de Fora, where global FrameNet is centered and FrameNet Brazil runs. His dissertation was under the major cognitive scientist and cognitive linguist Thiago Torrent. But he did come spend a year with us while he was getting his PhD in order to study what we're doing here in cognitive science and at Case Western Reserve University. He brought his whole family, they went to school. And now that he's got his PhD and is even more august, he's decided to come back as a postdoc. So, you know, we must be doing something right. Fred, as we call him in Cleveland, although his Portuguese nickname would be Fred, is an expert in frames, an expert in FrameNet, an expert in the cognitive science of frames, and an expert in computational applications of the theory of FrameNet. We're delighted that he's here today. He will be speaking on frame semantics, FrameNet, and the multimodal shift. Please help me welcome Fred.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, everyone, for welcoming me here. I really like it very much being here. That's why I came back, and I learned a lot. So what I'm presenting here, what we call the multimodal shift of FrameNet that started in FrameNet Brazil. It's part of what I came to do here 5 years ago. So I came here to work with Mark and to establish a way of how we could consider multimodal communication and the whole operation of FrameNet and frame semantics. So in this sense, what I'm going to do is present the general idea of the frame semantics here. I know that Mark have talked a little about frame semantics in the past weeks. The FrameNet, the computational implementation of frame semantics, and what we are calling the multimodal shift, adding image to FrameNet. So then I was touched by the way Mark has been talking to you about theory, model, and tool. And I prepared my presentation in this way, starting with theory. We start with the idea of frame. So what is a frame? What do you call frame? And what do you call a semantic frame in the frame semantics? So definitely that's how we began. The idea of frame is connected with the idea of having a frame that would guide our vision to some point to establish some kind of how we look at things and how we consider things. The idea of framing in a broad way would be this idea of how we understand situations, events, or concepts. And so we can see this as the process of applying a particular structure to a situation to make sense of it. That's the idea of putting some things into a frame. And the cognitive lens that through which we view the world. That's the general idea. That some work from Chuck Fumer, got into this idea of making it as a theory what he called semantic frame, and we consider the paper from 1982 the paper that founds frame semantics and the idea of the semantic frame as we know it. Although we have some other works from previous years, from Fillmore, from Minsky, from Goffman, that would work on the idea of framing and having this conceptual scene. So he defines frame with this. By the term frame, I have in mind any system of concepts related in such a way that to understand any one of them, you have to understand the whole structure in which it fits. The ideas that are connected with that are schema, script, scenario, ideational, scaffolding, cognitive model, or folk theory are examples that he uses to say that the idea of frame is connected with these other traditions in the theory of cognitive science and in the theory of linguistics to understand what he is trying to establish as a semantic frame. So from the paper, I got this idea of how we frame things. So he got this example of somebody who shows unwillingness to give out money in a particular situation would be framed for some people or in some situation as a stingy, and for other ones in other situations as a thrifty person. So this is the way we have a situation and we frame a situation to put a name on it. But we can also think in a different way. When we have a word and we have a lexical unit and we have to frame this lexical unit, so I choose bat and say that we can frame bat as the animal or as the tool. And we can think that to understand and to frame better the situation, we can put these words in action and we can have them a sentence. I saw bats. That would be a very plausible sentence to say, but that doesn't distinguishes the problem that we have here on understanding which bat are we talking about, and could make us think of this or even this in a very silly joke that we are trying to understand and disambiguate words. So frames are not only for disambiguate words. This is sometimes it's very useful, but sometimes it's not enough, and sometimes it's not the point. We can have more complex situations, like the adjective safe here. We can see it in use in these two warnings or two signs, in one pointing to a child-safe area and the another one pointing to a tornado-safe area. And these are definitely different perspectives of the word safe. And that's how we understand the idea of framing when we are talking about different perspectives. So the first one, we have the idea that an asset is exposed to some potentially harmful event. And here we have a harmful event that causes a risky situation. These are different frames in which we have the word safe acting. And this is one of the ideas that we use when we are talking about frame semantics. We're talking about how some words have a specific meaning in some situation, in some scene, in some frame. We can go on and see that in both cases, we are talking about a risk scenario that is described as a frame in the frame semantics tradition, as under that definition, there's an asset in a particular situation which has a likelihood of leading to or inviting a harmful event which will negatively affect the asset. This risk scenario is defined by the frame elements, the parts of which has to happen so as we can have the frame. But we have the core frame elements, the asset, the harmful event, and the situation that we need these three to make the scenario come, the frame to actually happen. But we can also have order informations like the non-core frame elements, degree, place, and time. But what is interesting here is that this frame is like an umbrella to other frames. It's connected with other frames that we can see here, listed as being at risk situation, and run risk. And so if you continue our analysis, we can see that a child safe area, we can see the safe in the definition of the being at risk, because here we have an asset, a child, that's in a state where it is exposed to or otherwise liable to be affected to a harmful event. On the other hand, we have the tornado safe area under the risky situation, because a particular situation is likely or unlikely to result in a harmful event befalling as an asset. So different perspectives of this idea can lead to different frames. So we are framing it in different ways, the same word, the same adjective, the same unit. So frame structures a word meaning. That's a lexical unit. With what we call lexical unit is a word that's part of a frame. When we have one meaning of a word in a specific scenario, we have one lexical unit. We can have the same word in another specific scenario. It would be another lexical unit. And the main idea of frame semantics is that a word evokes a frame. When we are going through the words, we are evoking these meanings, these scenes, this context that we have on our minds to understand what we are talking about. So evocation is something extremely important, and it's part of the way we understand the frame semantics. So if we have theory, we can talk about the model. The model of frame semantics is FrameNet. So what is FrameNet? That's FrameNet. That's a network of frames. That's the idea that we are then working on the situation in which we, to understand concept, we not only look at one specific scene, but the scenes are connected to each other. And the network, we make all these kind of connections. And what frame semantics try to understand, to do, and put it on FrameNet is the idea that we can model the way we think about these concepts. That's what we're doing here. So here we have the risk scenario. At the top of it, we have the run risk there, have the risky situation there, and they are connected with different kinds of relations. So for each color of arrow, we have a specific kind of relation between the frames. Always the direction of the arrow points, which is the parent frame, in which one is the child frame. And we have the idea of inheritance in the way that this particular frames, they inherit the attributes, the properties from the other frame. We have the situations in which we have a subframe. We have the perspective that was the case that we have talked about, being at risk and risk situation. We have frames that use parts of each other frames, but not exactly the same properties. The green arrows are pointing to that. We have the yellow arrows that causative of, so endangering is causative of being at risk. We have inchoative of, that's not specified here for the opposite way when something caused the other. And we have also the C also when we have frames that are related, but not exactly completed with any of these relations. So that's the idea of FrameNet. So FrameNet was established in 1997 as the computational implementation of frame semantics at the International Computer Science Institute, the ICSI. and was built to be a frame-based lexicon of English. And everything someone need to know about FrameNet is established in the book. That's the nickname of this publication, FrameNet 2 Extended Theory and Practice, that was published, revised in 2016. And this was informed first in 2003. So that's the idea of the beginning of FrameNet and what we have to know as the basics. FrameNet is a network of frames as a model of linguistic cognition to account for the meaning of lexical units. That's how it started. It's based on corpus annotation to attest the proposed analysis. So everything that we can see model as that network of frames, everything is attested and tested and then annotated. And we have corpus that are trying to figure out and showing how it works, how the words works, and how we can then see if we can use it in the way, if it sounds perfectly in the way that it should. So corpus annotation is a vital part of FrameNet. So going back to the annotation, I have here an example with a sentence with "this is a child-safe area," for the idea that was presented here in the sign, in which we have safe as the target lexical unit that is evoking the being at risk frame. And then for this, we look at the relation of the other words with this target lexical unit, and we can see that child is the asset that is being talked about being safe, and we have area as the place. I told you that we have some frame elements that must be presented so as we can have the frame occurring. But in some situations, there are some ellipses and there are some things that are not expressed clearly. So in this case, I put here a new instantiation for the dangerous entity that would be what is making safe of what? What would be dangerous for this child? It's not mentioned here in the text. It's not clear in the context, so it's a new instantiation, but the frame element is there, marked there for the computational purposes of it. And it could be a harmful event. In this case, we could choose one or the other. If we go to the tornado example, we have, this is a tornado safe area. And here we have safe again as the target lexical unit. The tornado would be the dangerous entity. And again, we have area as the place. And here, what is not instantiated is the asset. So the tornado is a dangerous entity to whom? So here we have, again, the annotation pointing that this is suppressed from the text, but is present in the structure of the network. Moving on, we should talk about FrameNet expansion. So one of the reasons that what I'm doing here and what I'm working on FrameNet expansion, and FrameNet Brazil worked on this a lot. And FrameNet Brazil offered new relations in the network of frames. So we worked, for example, in establishing a relation between a frame element to a frame. We are not just relating frames to frames, but we have frame elements that are inside one frame that are connected in some way to another frame. So, for example, I got here the touring frame. We worked a lot with the domain of the tourism, and we had a lot of projects working on that. And so the touring, we have the definition as a tourist experience and attraction, a location with a unique history or other socially recognized individual character with the goal of seeing and learning about it. Typically, the attraction has a source of information about the attraction, a guide, pamphlets of this place. example, we toured the Grand Canyon, and the core frame elements are established here: the attraction, the place, and the tourist. If we move on, we can see the Turing frame in the network of frames of the tourism scenario here as a perspective of attraction tourism, as along with attracting tourists and tourist potential. And we see the connections of the frame elements with other frames here in this schema, where you can see that tourist is, which is a core frame element in the Turing frame, is connected with the people by leisure activity frame. And we can see that the attraction is connected with three different frames here: natural features frame, the buildings frame, and local by use frame. And we have place connected with political locales frame. So when we do this in the network, we are adding layers of information. We are making the network more dense, and we can make it more fine-grained. And we have the possibility of building a model that would be more specific and try to see things in a more specific way. That's what we're doing here. We also have the qualia relations that was established by FrameNet Brasil. So this came from the original work of James Pustejovic, and we worked with the idea of an alpha has a qualia relations that we can call the formal, agentive, constitutive, and telic. The formal for what alpha is, the agentive matches what's the origin of alpha, the constitutive what alpha is made of, and the telic, the function of alpha, and that's a type of agentive alpha. So put it in motion. For a pizza, we have the formal, it's a food, the agentive, pizza, who makes a pizza, it's a cook or the pizza restaurant, and the pizza is constituted of flour, and the telic of a pizza, the purpose of a pizza is to eat, the verb. In this sense, we can connect lexical units to lexical units in the database, and we are adding another layer of information that we can use when we run the model to other specific projects. We can look at this into this data, and we can find some different ways of looking at it. So putting in action, we have the relation established with these words. They are what we call the ternary qualia relation, because we have them together with other frames. The sense, the relation between this lexical units, these words, are occurring with different frames. So for example, we have here pizza as an instance of food, and we have the frame exemplar and the frame element type here pointing to food, and the frame element instance pointing to pizza. So pizza would be an instance of food, and that's why we connected this words through the idea of what this frame is establishing. And the other relation that we started to establish was the multimodal annotation. We at some point started to talk about the idea of not only working with lexical units, with words, with sentences, but also other kind of materials. So the motivation was that human communication is inherently multimodal, and so should be the semantic representations we built on it. That was the main motivation, and the idea that we should do something about it and not only talk about text, because the experience, the cognitive experiences that we always have text connected with some other kind of mode of communication mode. Our hypothesis to go on it was that similar to the way in which words in a sentence evoke frames and organize their elements in a syntactic locality accompany them, visual elements, photos, video shots, and video sequences may also, one, evoke frames themselves and organize their elements on the screen, or work complementarily with the frame evocation patterns of sentences associated with the image that would be captions, audio, lettering, so any kind of lexical material that would be associated with the images. So let's try this idea with an image so we can see that this is a place. Everybody can recognize this with some cultural background, that this is a place, and also because we can interpret that as people that are somewhere. We can see an attraction here, and we can point at any one of these people as a tourist. So this is, I took this photo one day, and I don't have a good photo of me or my family in the prize because it's always like that. So we have an attraction and we have a tourist here. They are in a place. If we have the perspective of the tourist, we can talk about the touring frame. But if we have the perspective of the attraction, we can have the attracting tourists frame. So these are, again, the idea that we are trying to establish the way when we can look at things in a different way, the more specific way. For example, the tourist perspective would be expressed this in a sentence like, I visited the Christ in Rio. And the attracting tourists perspective would be establishing a sentence like, the Christ is the most visited monument in Rio. So when we move things from place, we move the perspective, we change the frames, we swap the idea in which we are working. And this is also very important for us on the way we are establishing the network and the way we foresee using it for other purposes in research or in natural language processing, for example. So it's time to talk about the tool. We could talk about a lot of tools. We have tools that are used to build this kind of things, but what I selected to talk about today was a corpus, a data set. That's the FrameSquare data set. That is a tool for using in natural language processing tasks or projects. This FrameSquare is a data set composed by multimodal objects. It goes from the corpus that was built Pedro pelo Mundo, a TV travel series that has 230 minutes of video. We have 10 episodes of 23 minutes. And we have 2,195 sentences that came from the audio spoken in this video. And we started looking for the visual objects. Just give you a glimpse of this show. So this is Pedro landing in Reykjavik in Iceland. I'll show some parts in English for you, not good, presuming that you have to understand Portuguese. And what made us choose this show is that we believe that it offers the way it combines images and text by the verbal expressions, the way the editing and the way the series is composed. It shows a very interesting way of combining it, because it's not very straightforward in the way that, oh, I'm going to get my bottle. Oh, here's my bottle. It's very complex, and it looks more like the way we really connect images and verbal data in our daily life, in our cognition. So was the way we got it. So what is what we are calling a multimodal object? It's a combination of image and audio at a specific time. So here we can see this image. In this image, Pedro was saying this sentence. So I decided to come to this city to understand how and why this country is rethinking its own identity. So this sentence was annotated using that form of doing FrameNet annotation. And here we have the annotated data for that bounding box there. So he was annotated for as the cognizer in the decision frame. And also we labeled him with the one thing that we call the CV name, the computer vision name, as a person in the people frame. So when we combine all this data, we started to have what we call multimodal object. We have data connected with the text, data connected with the image, and they are bound together by the time. So this is a sequence. It's a visual object for the image, what we call it a visual object, the bounding box in the region, the area of the screen, the lexical unit for the audio, and start to end a time lapse, a time specific time that starts because it's video, it's not still image. And this multimodal object has not only this information, but it carries all the relations between the annotated data as mediated by the semantic structure model in the FrameNet Brasil database. So that kind of stuff that I showed you, so a relation of a frame to another frame, a frame to a frame element, or the quality relations, this is all going with, and we can make it work in the model. So the frame square data set was made to data that accounts for the frame-based semantic representation of verbal language and its interaction with the frame-based interpretation of video sequences. What we were very interested at time when we started doing this is to look and understand how do we combine the verbal information and the visual information when we are watching some kind of video. One thing that's very important is to understand that there are videos and videos. It's different, the way we combine, what they offer. When we are looking at some kind of fiction movie, when we are looking to news broadcasting, when we're looking to an entertainment TV series like that, we made different, there are different operations that probably are coming because the different kind of data, the different kind of genre. So the genre is very important to make us look at some things. And what we could see here was that we don't have as much synchronicity in the verbal data with the image data as we thought we would have. And we need to make some connections for things that happened before and things that happened after. We see something or before or after things, we listen to some things. And we can establish these connections using frames. That's the idea that we come from here. So we had to design the data set, and we would use it tool to make it. We had the video, we had to broke the video in the text coming from the verbal part and the image coming from the video part, and then both would be annotated, both the text and the video would be annotated, and timestamped. And so the task started. We had annotators divided into permanent team and a temporary team. The permanent team was composed by 12 students that had a weekly routine. The temporary team were 32 students that were part of 2 different workshops, 5:45. The annotation tools used were for the full text, the FrameNet Brasil web tool. So we have a tool just to make the annotation. That could be the subject for another talk. And we had at that time one specific tool that was designed to pre-process the video and also to make video annotations. It's called Carum. Talk about it in this paper. But now Carum was implemented as part of the FrameNet Brasil web tool. That is an annotation tool that you can use online. And we came with the annotation guidelines. When annotating text, annotators should always watch the video. When annotating images, annotators should always read the sentences that are corresponding to what they are seeing, because we need the context. That would make this annotation multimodal. When we look at least two different modes of communication, and we try to establish some connection between them. Otherwise, would be image annotation and text annotation separately. So first, we annotate text because we run an experiment and to try to understand the connection, and we had the results that mostly we had the verbal language, what is said in this genre here, what was said was kind of guiding the eyes. So we established that we would first annotate text, then look for correspondence between text and image. For other types of videos, in other different experiments, in other types of data sets, we can do different things. We are doing a lot of different annotations right now. We have like 4 or 5 different projects that are looking in different ways of annotating. This was the first one. This was the first move of us going multimodal. And here is how we annotate. So we have this screen here. We have 3 print screens here. We go word by word, see if there's a lexical unit for it in the FrameNet database. Then we establish the ideas of, for example, we have people in the people frame, and we look, and try to see if the other words can establish one of the frame elements, can occupy, instantiating any of the frame elements in the sentence. So here we have go back in the suffering change, and here we have creative in the mental property frame that was targeted by this LU that is creative, the adjective creative. That are the LUs that were possible to annotate. People started and creative. That's the text annotation, this target specific that we're going to look. That's creative, the adjective there. And we have the people as the protagonist and the behavior. So here, one of the frame elements, 4 frame elements here is the protagonist. And here, the green one is the behavior of this mental property. So this was annotated, being creative as this kind of property mental. So here is a definition of the mental property frame. And here are how we can see the frame elements in the database. Then, once we do this, we go to the image annotation. So here, it's an example that I love it, because when they're talking about people going back to being creative again, the annotators found that this image was kind of representing the creativity. So this was annotated in the same frame, the mental property, but as the behavior that was being established before in the word. So we are connecting this image with the word creative through this frame annotation. But we can also add a level here that's trying to understand what we are seeing, the entity that we can see in this image. So this is a graffiti, and it's connected with the physical artworks frame. Let me show the context of this video I have right here. So Pedro is in Reykjavik and talking about he's talking about changes that happened in Iceland in the last year. People started being more creative again. So that's what we have here. See that the editor chose this image to establish the idea of creativity, and the viewer can associate that this is a kind of a representation of the creativity, and we can do, when we make this kind of annotation, we are adding this relation in the network. So go on here. The frame's there. The frame element is there. The lexical unit, the computer vision name is there. And we have start frame. These are numbers that point into the video frame. That's why the data set is called frame squared, because we have a video frame and we have a semantic frame. So we have a start frame here. There's also a start time that's not appearing here, but we have seconds here. And we have an end frame. That makes this time span makes the multimodal object here. So the multimodal annotation would be the combination of the text annotation and the video annotation. So during this process, we could find 7 different image text relations, kinds of different relations. I'm not going one by one, just showing that this one was the blending entity from visual object to instantiate frame element in text. So we didn't have the frame element in text. It was only incorporated in the creative word, the lexical unit, but now we can see something. So we blend this visual entity to that lexical unit. We have situations in which an image specifies a text. In this passage here in Edinburgh, he's saying that they're talking about the Scots, but it doesn't use the word, but we can see he says about men in skirts, and what we have annotated is a kilt. It's not skirt because we have something specific. We have this situation in which a visual object annotated for one frame instantiates another frame invoked by the lexical unit in the text. This one is a duplicated visual object for matching different instances of lexical units. So he's saying about this guy that he is American, people by origin, skateboarder, athletes by sport, that decided to go to Reykjavik. So we have the same bounding box. It's duplicated. You see number 39 there. So 39, 38, 37. We have three different bounding boxes pointing to the same area, but they are labeled in different ways. So we can add 3 layers of information in this portion of the screen. So that's why would say different instances of lexical units. But they are all pointing to the same lexical unit, the computer vision name, because what we see is a person. So we have person here in the people frame. This one is a perspective and text orientation shifts visual object annotation, because before this, we're talking about the cathedral there as attraction. So it was in the perspective of attracting tourists. And here, when we see the tourists and we see and we, depending on the sentence that we had there, it shifted to the idea of touring. So we have the tourist, and that's the attraction. We have that difference that I showed to you in the photos occurring right here in the video. We have situations in which a visual object instantiates what is a new instantiation text. So here they're talking about, so Pedro is talking with this the owner of a bar here, and they're talking that, oh, it's cold here. It's good that we drink and start warming up. They say we drink, but they don't see what they drink. And we are not exactly seeing what they are drinking. We see a glass in his hand. So we can attach that glass as the recipient that contains the drink that was mentioned in text. So this is a kind of, we can fulfill the new instantiation that was in the text using that visual object over there, the 325. And we can also have lots of type annotators hate this because we have multiple visual objects matching a single lexical unit. So people, he says, everybody here comes to see this statue. So who's everybody? She, and she, and she, and she, and she. We have to annotate all people that are there. So we are adding different layers. We are attaching the idea of these people with each of these body boxes. Okay, an important note that we have in our work is that annotations mean to represent possible perspectives on meaning construction. And so perspectives. We are working with the idea that we are looking at something, we have some perspective, and the annotations, they show the perspective of the annotators. This is approach, multi-perspectivized, and we have this connected with the perspective data manifesto that was published in 2021, and the idea that we need to consider disagreement in evaluation. So that's been the way we have been working. Marcelo is going to give you excellent examples next week about this. So the outcomes we have from here. So we have a gold standard data set, we believe, for multimodal NLP tasks in a multi-perspectivized approach. We have the annotation totals. So we have annotation sets, the combination for the text annotations when you have a lexical unit and the frame elements are connected with that. Each of that is an annotation set. We have 11,796 annotation sets, and visual objects. We have 6,841 visual objects. And the great thing is that we believe it was, it's the text of variability was very good because we have 611 discrete frames in text. So 393 discrete frames in image annotations. 129 discrete frames in CV name. So the name of the entities, it's natural that we would have less names than here, because here, for that example, for example, we have like 3 times the person being labeled as person, but for 3 different roles. And we have 478 discrete lexical units in the CV name. This number, we like this number a lot because this would be the name, the label we put to each object. And this is much more than the 80 categories of the MS COCO. That's one data set on image, on visual recognition. And it's close to the 600 boxable classes of the open image data set, the 7 categories, because here we also have another data set that's good in recognizing visual objects, but we believe that we have a more complex network of concepts, FrameNet. So we believe that multimodal FrameNet make meaningful connections between semiotic modes and has an image as a new token with linguistic anchorage. And coming soon, there are people working now to model training for automatized part of the annotation. And we have annotation of events in image, and we have other kinds of annotation. So what I came to do now, I'm working now, my project now is on adding to this data set data on news broadcasting, and try to see in terms of analysis how different this kind of material is from this, and also having another set of annotations to run other kinds of model. FrameSquare is a GitHub and Hugging Face available for use. We can use this data and train a model from it. And I have to acknowledge this funding research that I had. And I thank you for having attention. And I'm here to talk, to listen, and to answer anything if you want.
Let's stop for take questions.
Okay.
Questions?
Please.
You mentioned the kind of multi-perspectivist approach
Yes.
when creating data set. And I'm wondering what the process is for when there are disagreements in perspective and how that's resolved during the data set.
Yeah, that's the biggest point in this kind of data set. It would not be reasonable having different people annotating the same thing, because we would need a lot of data, and this kind of annotation is really slow. So the approach was, we are going to trust one annotator at a time. And that's why one idea was embracing this annotation, this only annotation, this multi-perspectivized approach. So Marcelo next week is talking about, he has experience on different annotators annotating the same thing. And it goes to the same conclusion, that we don't need to be that attached to the idea of having agreement.
But can I jump in like?
Yes, please.
So you don't have to wait till next week.
Yeah.
The idea of perspectivism is entrenched in the way FrameNet is built. So we do not expect people to see images and always frame that image in the same way. So let me try to come up with an example now. So if you see someone, a group of people watching a football, a soccer match, sorry, football is a different thing. If you see,
You see football.
yeah, you see a group of people watching a soccer match, and you ask different people to describe that image. Some people can describe that image as a group of people watching a soccer match, and some other group of people can describe that like athletes performing a soccer match in front of a group of people. So it's the same thing, but described from different perspectives. So this idea of inter-annotator agreement sometimes does not apply to FrameNet because of the way the network is built. So for the same image, you can have multiple perspectives. And while the data set, we noticed that even if you have like 50 people annotate the same image, they can come up with different sentences describing the same thing with different approaches.
So the conclusion is that cognitively, there's not necessarily an agreement. So why the model would have to have this agreement? So people from computational science maybe disagree. That's a topic. That is something. But we see some waves that are taking this into consideration and seeing that having data is more important than having this pure, that would be a kind of a pure data that it's not real in the way we think.
But you had mentioned, like these visual elements evoking frames.
Yes.
Have you guys looked into like social media frames at all with like, I don't know, with attention span shortening and people like having to grab people's attention in online spaces, how there's like frames of
Yeah.
different types of social media?
No, not yet. This project was directed to trying to capture the visual elements in image that are connected with the text. We have other projects that, for example, we had one project that was trying to compare the subtitles with the original audio and looking at the translation because it's very different. Sometimes, and in terms of frame, in terms of words, in terms of frame, so looking for a translation. We have people that are trying to look at the screen and try to figure out what's the event going on, taking into consideration what is being said in audio, but looking not to the entities but to the event. What is this? What's going on? So when Pedro is walking on the street with a guy, what is that? Is this an interview? Or are they touring? What are they doing? So this is another kind of annotation. And we have people trying to establish other categories of annotation. So for example, there's a group that is trying to point to and considering some elements in the cinematography of it. So angles, video shots, and some kind of sound effects, and trying to tag this and try to establish connection with these elements with different frames. So no, not yet. We haven't looked at that, but yes.
Sorry, what's your name?
I'm Robin.
Honest question, what do you mean by social media frames?
I was just thinking, like we were looking specifically at this TV show, right? And it was interesting because this TV show had specific types of frames it was building with those text and video connections.
By frames, you mean like frames in the cinematography
No,
way, or
I'm
like
like-
social, or like the semantic frames?
Like semantic frames being built, not necessarily with like text and video, like with like the captioning, but with like on social media with things like captions on the post or like being able to pull out these semantic frames from different types of information presented. Because social media, like it's very regulated. You can see the poster, you can see the comment, you can see, you know, it's a different type of media being presented.
Okay.
Where your brain can take in, you know, sort of like the image itself, but then also the comments, the post, the like count. There's all these external information that you don't necessarily get from like a video like that.
Okay.
Like a TV show. I don't know.
No, I know what you, I think I know what you're saying. I don't know if that's framing, but can you talk after this?
Yes.
So just.
No, that's okay. Any, yes.
Was there a reason you chose the specific TV episodes that you did?
We worked with the first season. So they have 10 episodes for the first season. That what the ones we got the license for using. And they have 3 more seasons. The second, third, and fourth, the episodes are 48 minutes, but we couldn't have the agreement to use it so far. The show is over, it's not on air anymore. I think it's streaming somewhere, I'm not sure, in Brazil. I tried to, my youngest son was, he wanted to watch all the seasons to plan his trip when he turns 20. He's going to go around the world, and he was looking to try to see it, and if he could watch it, but not. But we chose this show because it really is rich in terms of composing image and audio. So I came up with 2 European examples here, but they go to Egypt, Greece, Denmark, Iceland, Edinburgh, Cuba, Singapore. Whew. I don't remember the other ones. I don't remember. I think-
That's enough.
Yeah, that's enough. Yeah. But that, I was just thinking about the sampling here was very Eurocentric, right? So. Any other?
I worked with international on a FrameNet adjacent project.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of people hand annotating stuff. And now, like 25 years later, and annotating. So do you think that human cognizer is always going to be an essential part of the FrameNet project in particular, or maybe talk a little bit about what is automated, what is
Yes.
machine learning, what is human, and
Here it was everything manual.
Yeah, but my
Everything.
talk next week is exactly about automating.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. But
We tried, in the beginning, we tried to use object recognition to have the bounding box and just leveling. The problem is that the data sets that we could use to train the model would only look for traffic lights,
Right.
car,
Yeah. Bicycle.
person, yeah. So it was not useful for the things we had. So we threw it away. We have it installed, but we never used anything. Now we have been some experience with other projects with text annotation, automatic text annotation. And what we see is that we do it automatically. We need a human in the loop to check it. The results are good. We are starting, but we are also talking about annotating with specific domains. So this has been used for the health domain. Thiago is going to talk about it from 2 weeks from now about this project. And for these annotations, we did some samples manually. I did, and not I think other 2 researchers. We did some. And the model was trained with this samples, and then we generated automatic annotations, and we worked with that. So
But just to pull the curtain, like that's been a movement in Brazil that Eli and I and Arthur have been trying to convince Thiago for the case for automation of annotation and have humans validating the data.
yes,
So that's what I'm doing now with my postdoc research here, trying to push everything towards automation and having humans just validating sample data. But we're going to talk about this later next week.
but the problem is that we still need to grow the FrameNet database. So FrameNet Brazil is bigger than Berkeley FrameNet now, but we still
And that's why we need automation.
every week we have meetings when we talk about this. So I just found out this clock, we don't have clock in the database for any frame. What would we read the frame? The saver.
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm doing. So people, your annotators are annotating
the images, not just with what the images are, and that's then being linked to a pre-existing,
Yes,
right, that they're limited to the set of frames,
Frames, yeah.
and they're making those evaluations. They're like, this evokes these frames out of the ones that exist in
Exactly,
FrameNet
yeah.
Brazil. And that to me, it's interesting because this gives you a way of building then building your FrameNet
yes,
database, right? Because you're like, okay, if you annotated it with this is a clock and it evokes these frames, then you have some data that you can be associating clocks with those frames. It seems very useful. But yeah, and ultimately, that level of annotation is really tricky for people to do because it's so implicit for them. Like that this is that recognizing what frames are being evoked as opposed to recognizing what this is, and there's
Yes.
an existing correlationally built database of frames. Like it seems like the latter is what you would like to be able to do ultimately, is have some kind of built out frame net
yes,
that is much richer, much more data rich,
yes.
and doesn't depend on the circumstance of like an annotator having to recognize a connection here, or to say like, oh, I need to explicitly theorize a new frame. Because that's what makes working with, I mean, I know that FrameNet Brazil is bigger, but working with English language FrameNet, you're like,
Yeah.
this is the tiniest piece of
Yeah.
of lexical semantics is represented here.
And there's the issue,
It's
like,
like very.
if it's hard now and we only have like 1,600 frames.
Yeah.
Can you imagine someone trying to do manual annotation if we had like 1,000,000 frames?
Right, and yet,
Like to come up with,
and yet
what frame is
reality
this?
is like a
Yes.
million frames.
Exactly, yes.
So yeah, so it's, you're talking to be some about like using the data to build out the underlying ontology, the.
Using AI to come up with new frames and.
And working from the data to machine learning techniques to work from the data and correlation stuff.
Yes, and the thing is that we could not wait for
Yeah,
having a lot of frames to start annotating.
Yeah.
We cannot wait to have a lot of annotation to start building new frames, so we have to move on.
And by the way, on top of that, like I had this question when I was defending my PhD dissertation, like, and someone asked like, whoa, so, but you're doing manual annotation for visual content and images. Why didn't you do that automatically? That, yeah, because when I started my PhD, there was no such thing.
Yes.
That's why I didn't do it. But why didn't, yeah, because when Fred was doing this, there was no ChatGPT.
Yes.
So that's why I didn't do it.
When they started this project, they had no frames anywhere for tourism, period.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fred, comment?
Yeah, that just that in this meantime, we built Lutma, that's another tool for building frames that made it much more intuitive for humans doing it. You don't need to be that high level expert. We can have lots of people. We have our graduate students working on that in general, or suggesting, and we have weekly meetings to go up and try to have new frames or to have new lexical units in other frames to discuss that. But it's easier. We have more tools and we are
Yeah,
working more.
what I can do now with like $3 and the ChatGPT API is amazing, yeah.
So Fred, I have a final question.
Final question.
Final question for you. We need, and you can speak to the worldwide audience here. That is, at a research university, students very frequently say, I want to do research, right? Want to do research. But it's actually extremely hard to do any sort of research. You have to design a little research. You have to have an idea. The hardest thing in science is to have an idea worth checking. You have to get data, clean data, wrangle data, analyze data. It's doing research is not somebody saying to the student, hand me that lab flask. That's not research. So students find it, to their dismay, very hard to get into research, and they're very frequently crestfallen because they didn't actually have an appropriate frame
Yes.
for a researcher before. But here you are. Suppose there are students who want to get into research in cognition and computation. What are the things that they could immediately join, immediately learn about, focus on to come up with a little semester-long research project that's worth doing and is plausible, where they scope the job? Where would they turn? What's your recommendation to those students?
I always would recommend FrameNet.
Well, what would they do? Okay, so they go look
Okay.
up FrameNet.
Look up FrameNet, and we can look at occurrences that are not there. It's a very interesting topic, like just search and see, wow, nobody has never put something into a frame. Is this a frame? Is this situation, is this verb, is this noun a frame? How can we have this? And adding something, adding a domain. For example, we have domains and building domains are not exactly extremely difficult in terms, or starting a domain is not extremely difficult in terms of frame semantics. We have one problem, that there is one frame for education, one frame for the whole domain of education, and it's not work. It doesn't work at all. So we built a tourism domain. We have been working with the violence domain and the health domain. And this is looking at this and trying to establish what are the frames, looking at data and trying to look what the data says about it, that we can make it happen, or how the data points to the possibilities of building frames. So building domains is something very interesting. Or you can see a tiny domain, or for some time, you saw the Scott guy with a bagpipe. When I came here 5 years ago, we have that annotated, the bagpipe as a noisemaker, because that was the frame we had. But then we built the musical instruments frame, and we could look. And when we are building things like that, we try to get data that would support this. So is that possible? Is a musical instrument something that makes a frame? What would be the frame elements? So this is something.
Great, and a teaser for next week.
And do launch next week. The idea for my presentation is that use this thing that Mark has been talking about the theory and models and tools, to show how I did the idea of doing research to find a gap in the theory, and show how can you build a pipeline to a project, because that's what I'm doing here, like the project I'm doing. So the pipeline I built to come up with a project after finding a gap in the field I'm researching. So
Marcel is the one who breaks everything. Is this
Real researchers
when we
doing
do
real-
something, Marcel, can you please try this and see if it's not working or where it's not working, and take up.
Let's thank our speakers.